Welcome to this edition of Tacoma's Pierce County Sports Museum's Locker Room Chat. Hello, I'm Jay Strickers, your honored host for today's Locker Room Chat, and we are extremely excited to have as our guest today, Jeanne Naccarato. Jeanne is a member of the Women's International Bowling Congress Hall of Fame and the Professional Women's Bowling Association Hall of Fame, as well as a 2005 inductee into the Tacoma Pierce County Sports Hall of Fame, as well as several other Hall of Fames. Jeanne is a longtime supporter of bowling, as well as a bottom line supporter of all things sports here in our Tacoma Pierce County community. Jeanne, welcome to the Locker Room Chat.
Hi, Jay. It's great to be with you, finally.
Yes, it's great to have you with us, Jeanne. So there's so much to go over and talk about, Jeanne, but let's go to where all things start, and that would be the younger years. Again, a lot to talk about. I believe your growing up years were in Cleveland, Ohio. So talk to us a little bit about growing up in Cleveland, your family, neighborhood, sports that you were involved with growing up.
Well, Jay, as you said, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. My dad started me bowling along with my other brother, Tom. I'm the youngest of six in our family, and Tommy and I grew up together. So before I was bowling, I was into archery. And one day my dad took us bowling, and I just fell in love with it. I stopped playing archery. My brother went on to be a very good player in that sport, but I loved it from day one. And he taught me my basics. And when I was never joined um, a Batum League, because when I was bowling, we didn't have junior bowling. So when I was 14, I was in adult leagues, and I had to get my parents' permission to go bowl the traveling league. It was one of the best leagues in Cleveland, Ohio, the Women's Traveling League. So I started bowling in the adult leagues when I was 14, 15, and I bowled for Mayland Lanes. And I probably carried about a 170 some average the first year when I started. And then bowling in high school, we did some interscholastic league bowling, and that was fun. But we had minimal junior bowling. Today in high school bowling for girls, they can go ahead and get a scholarship for the colleges that they usually want to go to, and they have great bowling teams. The college teams are very competitive, and a lot of the girls from the college um, rankings go on to be professionals. And a lot of that in our bowling center has to do with Bob Hansen. He does a lot of the coaching with our junior bowlers all the time.
So, Jeanne, let me ask you a question here. You say you fell in love with bowling at an early age. Did bowling fall in love with you too? Did it come easy to you? Was it something you had to work and kind of grind at in order to perfect your game? Or how did all that come about?
You know, I would say my dad was a decent bowler. My parents just got back to bowling after raising six kids.
Yeah.
And my dad taught me the 5-step approach the second time we went bowling. The first time I stood at the line and threw the ball. The second time he taught me the approach, and I took off from there. I had some great kind of coaches growing up. Always, a lot of people wanted to help me, but my dad was my primary coach until probably I was like 10, 12, and then a couple of the guys from the bowling center helped.
So you mentioned 14 getting into this adult women's league. Certainly 14, we don't think of being an adult. Is that something you qualified for? You had to have a certain average. You applied to be that. How did that come about?
Well, the team for Mayland Lanes needed a bowler. So all I had to do was get my parents' consent to go bowl.
Huh.
And I think the minimum average in that league might have been like 150. There are probably at that time at least 12 to 14 teams from different bowling centers in Cleveland on the east and west side.
Yeah, yeah. So you're 14 in an adult league. How did the dynamics work out with that? Were you accepted right in? Did you have to kind of prove yourself to the ladies?
Absolutely not. I was not well accepted. Um, it took maybe a year and then I got respect. I was very quiet, and one of the women always says I needed to be very humble, and I thought I was always very humble because I was pretty quiet. I just bowled, I minded my own business. But after a year or two, yeah, I was more accepted. And then I bowled with my mom in league
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Kind of had to find your place on the team and allow them to gain some respect for you, it sounds like.
Right. Even though I was just a kid,
Yeah.
know, but I was, I beat a lot of those women and they didn't like that. My dad
No,
liked it, but they didn't.
well, obviously, it was a very competitive sport at that time, as it still is. And egos do get involved when you get down to competition for sure. And managing that, I'm sure, is a big piece too. How about some of the mentors? You mentioned your dad. Anybody else that helped you along the way? Here we
Well,
know bowling has kind of the agony and the ecstasy. I'm sure you had wonderful times, some challenging times. Talk to us a little bit about your coaches and how they helped you progress.
I had a coach. My first husband, Rick Maiden, coached me for a while, and then he's the one who kind of said, "You should really go out on the tour and try it." And I never had aspirations of going out on the tour. My aspirations were becoming a nurse because I grew up in the nursing home business. My father started a nursing home, and all my brothers worked there. And I worked there for 15 years. And it is still family owned and operated outside of Cleveland in Aurora, Ohio. And so when Rick could only take me to a certain level, I worked with another coach for a few years out of Chicago. And then it was just not going very well. And I remember coming home, bowling a league on Friday night. We had an all women's team, and his name is Phil Cilia. And he told me after, he said he had a little bit too much to drink that night. He said, "I will coach you. Be in my pro shop on Monday and we'll discuss it." So I went in there. We talked about it. I said, I want, and I told him he knew a few years ago I wanted him to coach me, but he wasn't ready, I guess. And so he took me under his wing in 1985. The first day we worked together was a nightmare. I went home crying. I called his wife. I said, "Donna, Phil yelled at me." And I said, "I don't know if I can deal with him." So the second time we worked together, everything just clicked. And that was in late in November of 1985. And in 1986, we started our tour in February in Fort Pierce. I led that tournament, and everything just was falling into place in 86 because that's when I became Bowler of the Year. And
Well,
it,
let's talk a little bit about 1986 because you certainly did become Bowler of the Year. What a breakout year it was. Tell us a little bit about your professional titles, and the success that you had in that year, Jeannie.
okay. 1986 was one of my best years on tour. I think I won 3 or 4 titles. I was Player of the Year, and I think it was October 1986. I was bowling a tournament, and I shot the world record. Shot 300, 300, and had the first 9, and then I left a bucket and I chopped it and I shot 264. So I had 864. But before I started that 3-game set, the end of the third game of my first set, I had the last 7 strikes in a row from singles, from doubles, and then I had to switch pairs. So in essence, I had 40 strikes in a row. And that was just broken a few years ago by a male, not by a woman. So I still hold it, I believe, for 40 strikes in a row. The
That's
nice,
just hard to comprehend, Jeannie. 40 strikes in a row. Now, when this is happening, are you counting up all these 25, 26, 30,
no,
38?
no,
You're just in the moment.
no. My mom and dad were there to watch.
Yeah.
And the first game, now it's an old bowling center, so we had the wood benches, and my dad was sitting like right behind me. So I had the first 7 or 8 the first game. And my dad leans over, taps me on the shoulder, and he says, "Why don't you shoot a 300 game for me?" I said, "Yeah, right, Dad." So, of course, I go, and I'm in the 10th, and I'm nervous. And I thought, and I shoot 300. So my mom and dad were very elated. So now we're in the second game. I'm in the 8th frame. My dad leans over and taps me on the shoulder and says, "Why don't you shoot another 300 for me?" And I said, "Okay, Dad, you're asking a lot here." And that 300 I was very nervous on because it's very unusual to shoot back-to-back 300s.
Yeah.
And then again, I shoot another 300. So I'm in my last game. Darn it, my dad never tapped me on the shoulder, Jay, and said, "Why don't you shoot another 300 for me?" He never did. I think he was just stunned at what was happening.
Uh, he had to be. If I'm correct here, you were Ladies Professional Bowlers Tour Player of the Year, Bowlers Digest Bowler of the Year that year. And what a great year it had to be. Jeannie, 300 games. That's almost like somebody, I don't know, it's just hard to even comprehend. I think you've got a number of those. How many 300 games did you have, you think, in your career?
35. And that's, yeah. And a lot of other women from our tour have more, but I was up there.
35 300 games. So just talk a little bit about, because you're, 12 strikes going to get you to 300. You're at 9, 10. Mentally, how do you process that to keep your composure, to make sure your mechanics and everything work well with that much pressure on you?
I think one of the things that Phil always taught me, and it always stuck to me, is if you can take your practice game to your competition game, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I've always focused on. And also breathing. We all get nervous. And if I always told myself, if I'm not nervous before a competition or when I'm in that position, because that's what athletes like. They want to be there in the 10th frame. They have to strike, throw the last 3 strikes or throw a strike to win. So it's a lot of mental. Some people might have the game, but they don't have the mental aptitude for it.
Yeah. So Jeannie, bowling 300 games, we know there's the physical and the mental aspect of this. Tell us a little bit about the mechanics when you're bowling and you're going for a 300 game. Are your mechanics the same? Is your ball speed the same? Do you vary things? How does that work for you mentally and physically when you get to the point where the opportunity to roll a 300 game is a real possibility?
Oh, right, Jay. You are bowling the same way every time. Bowling is a game of repetition. And that's one thing I guess Phil had me do. I was very repetitious. It was very hard to see if something went mechanically wrong in my game because that's how close I was. You just have to be really close. You're not going to always be perfect. My ball speed on the tour was one of the lower ones, but my ball speed was basically pretty much the same. And my mechanics never wavered. I was always the same approach.
So let's talk just a little bit about then in between bowling or in between your frames. So you bowl, you hit a strike, you come back, you sit down. Do you have the same routine when you
I,
go in between frames?
I have the same routine all the time. You could even watch some of my YouTube videos, especially, and I do the same thing. We have them at the bowling center, and I'll watch it. Said, oh, I still do the same thing if I was bowling. Absolutely. And when
So
I'm on the bench for my next shot, I'm thinking about my next shot, where I'm standing, what I'm looking at before I get up on the approach. You always have to have a game plan before you put your foot on the approach.
okay, so you mentioned your dad leans up and taps you on the shoulder about bowling a 300 game. That interrupt you? Did you bother you a little bit? You
It
say,
did
Dad,
not,
what are you doing here?
no, it did not bother me. I just was like, why didn't you say something the last game? But the
Yeah.
last game, the lanes might have been changing a little bit because I felt like I made a good shot there, but it stuck me. It's the way it was.
Well, you mentioned the lanes changing. And again, for what we know, we have a lot of serious bowlers here in Tacoma, Pierce County. Tell us a little bit about that. How do the lanes change during a tournament or during a certain game that you have?
Right. Well, Jay, they do dress the lanes with oil. They go down a certain amount of feet. There's a certain pattern. And you have those bowling balls. Everybody's playing in a little different area. So
Yeah.
they're wearing it down. So you have to move because the oil evaporates and dries up. The ball doesn't go as long. It starts hooking or turning earlier. So you have to make your adjustments. And
Oh,
sometimes it's quicker than others. Sometimes you can play in an area for a longer period of time, but then you have to start moving. It's the same thing in golf, like reading your greens,
yeah. Yeah.
which I'm not good at.
Interesting. So you can feel that or sense
You
that
see it.
with
You
how
see
your
it.
ball speed and how it rotates, et
Right.
cetera.
You see your ball reaction, how it's finishing, where it's going. If it's going too much left, you have to move left. If it's not making it up to the head pin to the right, you move right. Very simple.
Amazing.
Those are
Um,
the basic, very
yeah,
basic.
yeah. Well, that brings up Yogi Berra's one of his favorite quotes, as we all know. Of course, he said baseball for you'd be bowling any sport, 90% mental, the other 50% is physical. Uh, your mental toughness, where do you think that emanates from? Is it something innate, something you had to learn, something that happened along the way?
I feel that some people have it, but you have to work at it and you have to be in positions and you're going to have failure, but you have to learn from your failures when you just lose it. And it does happen to a lot of I watch it on the golf all the time because I love playing golf now. And I watch the tour players and it's a tough game. Golf is very, very tough. And I love it. And but you have to work at it. Some people, I went to a sports psychologist too. Stan helped me
Mhm.
with one of the guys from the Oakland A's. I worked with him a couple of times and it helped just because
Well,
you have to work at it.
now you just threw a name out there, Stan Naccarato. Tell us a little bit about how you met Stan and how that progressed. And you're what, a Midwest girl, Cleveland, Ohio, coming on out here to Tacoma. Tell us about that. How'd you meet Stan and how'd you matriculate here to Tacoma?
Okay. Well, 1984, Jay, I won my first national title here at Narrows Plaza Bowl. The following year in 85, we usually come in a couple of days early to do a press luncheon, just some PR work for the bowling center. And Chuck Bez was the bowling proprietor at Narrows Plaza. So there was a huge press luncheon there. Stan was there, Art Popham,
Sure.
people from the News Tribune. They had a lot of dignitaries. The mayor was there. And so I ended up sitting next to Stan. Jay just thought he was a nice guy. I was divorced a year before. I wasn't looking. I was just focused on having a great time out on the tour and focusing everything bowling wise. And, Stan had World Series rings. And I said, of course, I asked him about his World Series rings. And he told me he was the baseball guy. Well, the next morning, he's on the Art Popham show. He's doing it from Narrows Plaza Bowl. He's coming off. I'm going on. We just see each other, exchange pleasantries for a moment. Nothing, not a long conversation. So that night we had the celebrity pro-am at Narrows. And my best friend, Robin Romeo, to this day, we roomed together on tour for 20 some years. And Pam Buckner, we were bowling the pro-am. And Stan kept coming over to my pair. And Robin and Pam came over. This guy really likes you. I said, oh, please, please. I don't need any of this in my life right now. So we start bowling the tournament. He's watching us bowl, watching me bowl. And it was a Tuesday night. We got done bowling match play. Stan came up to me and asked me, would you like to go out for a drink? And I said, sure. So I told Robin and Pam, and they went, oh, really? Remember, we had the bowl in the morning, so we left around 9:30 at the bowl because we started bowling at 7. We're done about 9:30, 10 o'clock. Well, I got back to the room. It was the Apple Inn over on Hosmore's where the girls stayed. That night, we went to Shenanigans down on the waterfront and had a glass of wine. I only had one. And they had a piano bar. Mike Strickland was playing the piano there. And it was really a nice night. Took me back to the hotel, dropped me off. Came up the next day, watched us bowl. And we were all going to Vegas. Our next tournament was our last tournament of the year. And I was leaving on Thursday. And Wednesday said, would you like to go out on Thursday night? I said, well, I'm leaving tomorrow, but I can change it. So I didn't fly out until Friday to go to Vegas because I didn't have to be there until Friday. So I stayed an extra day. Everybody else left. Stan took me to Warren Chin's restaurant, The Dynasty, up in Federal Way. And I knew really from Shenanigans there was something special about this guy. Yeah. And then so we had a long distance relationship until 89 when I moved out here. And we were married in 1992.
Yeah. Well, it's important for us to hear that because, hearing Stan Naccarato and Jeanne Naccarato, it's always been those two together, with Mr. Tacoma and with your wonderful bowling career. So that's, I think we can all smile and reflect on that a little bit and just see how that probably transpired between you two. That's wonderful.
Yep.
So Jeanne, your bowling career, I'm just going to highlight a few things here. You can chat about these, but it's just so incredible. Many national, regional ladies pro bowler tour titles, WIBC, Women's International Bowling Congress, holding records. I've got you down 6 game total, 1,639 pins, 9 game total, 2,353 pins, 18 game total, 4,452 pins. It's hard to even comprehend this. I'm sure the local bowlers and people that follow the sport can appreciate that. Your 3 game series of 864. First female bowler in Tacoma history to roll a 800 series. I think you had an 820 at Tower Lanes. 2019 U.S. Bowling Congress Senior Queens Tour Champion.
My last title.
Last title. There you go. Wonderful. Professional Women's Bowling Association, what, 10-time champion? Do you ever wake up and say, did this really happen to me? Am I really the one that did all of this and accomplished all this in my life? Just your thoughts on your career, Jeannie.
You know, Jay, when I moved 3 years ago and I got rid of some of my trophies and everything, I kept a couple at the bowling center. And I have the one picture I have is my action shot that was on the front page of the News Tribune in 1984. And I think that sold for the men to have their US Open here because Tacoma gave great publicity to bowling. And I walk by it. I think I'm most proud of some of my Hall of Fame. I really like that. And it doesn't, sometimes it pinches me, but then I watch these younger players and I thought, oh, wow, they can really throw the ball well. They have a lot of great ball speed. I don't know. I think we move along in life.
Sure.
And so many things are like more important to me than my bowling career. But I do once in a while think, especially when I met Stan, you know, that was a huge turning point in my life for the better. And he was always a great supporter of bowling, and all the girls on the tour loved him. And he gave a lot of the girls verbal abuse at times just for fun.
You bet. Well, you know, you had your bowling career, your wonderful life with Stan. Now you've parlayed that, of course, into your ownership of the Tower Lanes. Continue to support bowling in the Pacific Northwest. You mentioned high school bowlers coming there, the girls. We certainly recognize and honor them at our Tacoma Athletic Commission, Athlete of the Year events. We know you have a lot of ladies bowl there, as well as other folks' tournaments. And the Tower Lanes is just so much more than bowling. You know, you've got putt-putt, you got golf, you got the restaurant, tons of camaraderie with the people that come there to be together and talk sports, talk life, and so forth. So you've certainly parlayed your bowling career and your life with Stan into this facet of your life. So your thoughts and reflections about the Tower Lanes and all the things that you are doing there that are so wonderful for our community.
You know, I was just giving lessons before I was asked to be a partner in Tower Lanes. And I thought, oh, I'd like that because it was diversified. We had miniature golf. I wanted something different. So that was one of my best decisions ever, not only financially, but I just love it. I mean, to this day, I still love being in that atmosphere and have met so many great people through our restaurant, through our bowling center, through the kids who are bowling there. And then especially our events. I mean, we've had a lot of events. You know, the TAC was coming there for many years and just love to see them. And we just love them and we try to do the best job that we can. We have 5 owners of the bowling center, and Bob Hansen and I are the only working owners. But the other 2, we have 2 other bowlers who owners who are bowlers in their own right, and one who doesn't bowl. So, but Andy Ridding is our non-bowler, and Gary Glenn bowls in the league, and Lance Lorfeld, he bowls in the league.
Yeah.
They're both.
Well, wonderful. When you go to the Tower Lanes, folks, you will always see Jeannie. She is not behind the counter. She is out interacting with people, the bowlers, people in the restaurant. She's very, very hands-on. And Jeannie, your persona and that of Bob certainly have gone a long ways to make the Tower Lanes the place that it is for great camaraderie in today's community here in Tacoma and Pierce County. So Jeannie, thank you so much for chatting with us today, especially for all the thrills that you have brought to all of us during your bowling career, your commitment to bowling within our Tacoma Pierce County community, and your support of local athletics. And that concludes today's presentation, and we thank you for joining us on another edition of the Locker Room Chat, highlighting the life, times, and professional bowling career of Jeanne Naccarato. Thank you, Jeanne.
Thanks, Jay. It was great. It was really fun.